Okay, so no doubt you'll be familiar with some Teams meetings, being remote workers. Feel free to offer your face to the forum. I can see a couple have done so already, but please try and mute yourself when you're not speaking. If by chance you forget, I'll do it for you. I promise to try not to cut you off mid-session. There is going to be a lot of content. We do have chat open for asking questions. Just bear in mind that we will get to those questions at the end of the session rather than dealing with them throughout. We do have a lot of content to offer, and obviously you will may find that your question is answered throughout the session. So this briefing is also being recorded. As you can notice, we'll get a recording and a transcript at the end, so we catch all the things that you're saying in a good way. Okay, if you have a burning question, please add it to chat, as I said, or raise your hand at the end of the session and we will get to you. Let's move on. Okay, so I think Reconciliation Week has just passed, but acknowledgement is everywhere. I'm joining today from the Awabakal lands, and I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, their country and their deep connection to the land, sea and community. I respect elders past, present and emerging who have looked after this land and its waters for millennia. In the spirit of reconciliation, we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Okay, I'll hand over to Kath for a safety share.
Thanks, Georgia. So we had a recent incident down at Picton where we were conducting some emergency works for the branch line, and quite a lot of pressure to get the branch line up and running for a heritage train. This works involved transiting from the Up Refuge at Picton through to the branch line. What happened on the day is that we had a TWA and the train was cleared through the in and the outer hand signaller. The train stopped at the platform. It took a little bit longer at the platform than would normally take. It was offloading a disabled passenger. And in the interim period, the protection officer determined that the train had cleared the worksite and gave permission for a hydrogen dump truck to reposition onto the up main. The train departed the platform and slowly, thankfully, and came across the high dreamer about 200 metres away. While the investigation is still ongoing, it was very clear to us straight away that our rules didn't mandate a clearance hand signaller. We probably left it to the individual to determine if a hand signaller or clearance hand signaller is required or not. So we've issued a flash alert to mandate that where we're using a track work authority or a track force protection, the PO or TFPC track worker must ensure that rail traffic that has been authorised to pass a work site has cleared the exit end boundary of the work site, and that's been confirmed prior to allowing workers and equipment to recommence work and access the track. And that's either got to be done by the PO visually ensuring that the train has cleared, or by verbal confirmation from a clearance hand signaller or a designated competent worker who is positioned at the exit end boundary of that work site, and that verbal confirmation has been given that the train is clear of the work site. Thank you, Rich. So agenda for today, we'll give a brief summary of the project that we're discussing. I know a lot of you will have heard of it before, but just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. We'll give you an update on our self-performer authorisation process and where the panel is currently up to at the moment. We'll then look at the transition period that we'll be shortly starting to enter, and then there'll be time for some questions and wrap up. Okay, so why are we doing this? Currently, we're having a lot of safe working incidents at the moment, probably more than I've seen in recent years in ARTC. And unfortunately, a lot of them involve our contractors. So we want to make sure that our contractors are getting the same support that our own internal staff get. And we want to have the confidence that the contractors' safe working resources are going to safely protect our work sites and keep all our workers safe, whether that's a contractor or an ARTC worker. whilst also giving us those value for money outcomes. Switch. So our current state, we've got around 50 organisations that currently provide safe working to ARTC. And we have numerous POs, TFPCs, track workers that jump from pillar to post, often chasing the highest dollar, often leading one organisation or ARTC high and dry at the last minute, trying to find a replacement as that happens. So we're moving to a little bit more control over those organisations and those people, and that we will have a defined number of panel members. The number has not been specified yet, but it will be a reduction from 50, and they will be authorised safe working providers purely for safe working. On the right hand side is self-perform organisations, which applications can be made to become authorised to use their own safe working employees, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So that's our future state that we're moving towards in the next 6 months. So we have put together a framework for the provision of safe working services, and this framework documents the key systems and processes that we expect our organisations to have in place to be able to manage their safe workers. And these are things like mentoring systems, training systems, verification of competency, fatigue management, drug and alcohol management, to name a few. So out of that framework forms two ways of giving work to ARTC for safe working services panel. The panel has been set up to cover all 3 of our rule jurisdictions, so New South Wales, Code of Practice and TA20. And the panel members have gone through, or we've gone through an evaluation to determine those panel finalists at the moment, and we can't say anything more about process as the process is still ongoing. On the right hand side, we've got our self-performer organisation process, and this is a process where organisations with employed safe working resources can apply for authorisation to use these resources. And we'll talk a little bit more about the process that they can go to do that in a few slides. Now hand over to Rich.
Good afternoon, everybody. So what I want to do on this slide is just update you around some of the timeframes associated with the project. We wanted to be upfront about some of the changes that we've had. So the table sets out the projected timeframes we originally had, and I'll just run through those items now. So the self-perform application process was scheduled to open week commencing 6th of June. We opened a day late on the Saturday on the 11th of June. So that application process is now open on Avetta, and we can see burning reports that some of you have obviously started that opt-in process, which we'll talk about a bit more about later on. Probably the biggest change that you're wanting to hear more about actually is who's going to be on the panel. When will I be informed if I've issued a submission, or when will I be told who the panel members are if I'm an organisation that I need to use the panel? So we originally projected that would be mid-June. That is delayed, but we will complete that activity early in July. And then the requirement to use an authorised provider of safe working services, again, that will now commence during July rather than 1 July. So we've had some changes in timing there that we wanted to make you aware of.
So the self-performer authorisation process, that is the process, as we said, is a pathway for organisations that meet our requirements to become authorised to use safe workers that they specifically employ to deliver those safe working services on a contract that's held with ARTC for something other than safe working. So it's part of a wider contract. It's really important to note 2 or 3 things here. Firstly, the workers need to be employed by that organisation. They need to have their primary RIW registration as that organisation, and that organisation cannot subcontract those safe workers to another organisation for safe working. So just 3 things to be really bear in mind. Applications for the self-performer opened on the 11th of June through Avetta, and we'll talk about that more in a couple of slides. Next switch.
So the the self-performer authorization questions and the self-performer work instruction documents have all been shared previously. These documents contain our requirements for authorized self-performer organizations. They cover things like what are your key processes, and this is fatigue management, it could be mentoring, it's those kind of processes. They're all set out in the documents and the questionnaires. It could be what your key resources are, who are your existing safe workers, what will you do when you're delivering the services to prepare the safe worker for the services when they prior to actually the services commencing, and also supporting them during the services being provided. It will cover off incidents, breaches and regulatory notices, and it will cover off a prioritization question to allow us to understand how urgently we need to respond to your application. So just a quick update as well in this space. We previously circulated a document that was a self-performer work instruction. We're rebranding that to a requirements document rather than a work instruction. So if you see that change, we just felt it was more appropriate given the nature of that document. So if you want to apply to become a self-performer organisation, we absolutely encourage you to do so. You need to do this via our VETA system. We've previously been through this, so it's a bit of a recap. You can access the VETA, the safe working services, the self-performer questions on a VETA via your existing ARTC VETA account. You just need to opt in, and I'll show you some screenshots of that in a few moments. Once you've opted in and filled out the questionnaire and completed those activities, someone in the ARTC safety team will review your submission. And then authorised organisations will be added to a register of pre-approved or pre-authorised self-performers. And then what we'll do is complete periodic reviews to ensure that that authorisation is appropriate to be maintained. And in general terms, once authorised, that will last for a 3-year process. You can apply to become a self-performer organisation at any point. It's not a tender period associated with this. It's an open process, so any day of any year you can apply to become a self-performer organisation. You can also change your mind as well. If you've previously opted out, you can go back in and opt in, and vice versa. So we've got a few screenshots here from our VETA system. Now, apologies, it is a subsection of a screen, but if you're familiar with a VETA, you'll recognise the shot. The first thing you'd have to do to opt in is go into the compliance section, and you'll find something called self-performer opt-in, which is this here. There's a selection button you can choose here, and that will start your process, your 2-step process to opt in to become a self-performer. Really important piece of information, and the reason we probably delayed a little bit was just making sure this worked, was that whether you choose to opt in or opt out, and if you choose to opt in and whether you're successful in your application or not, it will not impact your overall VETA flag. So if you were green overall on a VETA when you went to commence this process, that's what you'll remain. So we thought that was an important piece of information to share with you. The second step in the VETA opt-in process, it's almost asking the same question twice, but it's required from a system perspective. You'll notice there's a box that pops up. You'll have to say whether you want to opt in and select yes or no. Once you've done that, you'll need to actually go back to the home page to access the self-performer questions. And that's not the most intuitive step. So that is something you actually have to do by navigating around the VETA system. Once you've completed the 2-step opt-in, you'll get access to the opt-in, so you'll get access to the self-performer questions, and what you have to do is click on the complete box there as is shown. And then what I've got here in the next couple of slides is just 2 types of sample questions. So at the previous session to this communication session, we shared the self-performer questions, and those have been simplified slightly. We have removed the incidents questions that was already covered in a VETA, and we just changed a bit of the grammar, but otherwise the templates and the questions all remain the same. So if you've done your pre-work on those, it will really help you in terms of copying and pasting and responding. But this is a question here, and this is the key processes question. So the types of the information you need to provide. And in this instance, what you'll need to do is respond by uploading a file of your choice. And then there's a file size limit of 750 megabytes, and there's quite a wide range of file types accepted. And you can either just click choose to upload, or you can just drag and drop from another location in your computer. And you've got free choice there. There's no mandatory template you have to fill out. Question 2, and I won't go through all the questions. I'll just cover off on the 2 key types. So this is the question that relates to the existing safe workers that you employ, noting that they must have their primary registration with your organisation as well. They must be an employee, and they mustn't be a casual employee. In this case, we've provided a template that we need you to populate. And the reason we've provided templates for some of our question sets is it really speeds up our ability to evaluate and complete the evaluation of your application. So please don't change the spreadsheet. Please stay to the spreadsheet. If you do, we'll only be in contact with you asking you to comply to it. If you have any problems with the spreadsheet, please reach out to the SWIP email address for assistance in the short term, or through your regular Avetta contact. What you have to do for this one is download the template, and that's in the blue text just here. Complete the template offline, save it, and then upload it back into upload the spreadsheet back in. And you can do that again by clicking choose or just dragging and dropping. So there's 2 different types there. Okay.
So a couple of the key documents that we've updated to support the process and the implementation of SWIP-A. The first one is our RLFPR 003, the protocols for entering the rail corridor. And we've updated section 2.2 to mandate that if you're providing safe working resources, or safe working resources are required on the ARTC network, you've either got to be an ARTC employee, an accredited RIM or RSO that's operating under their own accreditation, sourced from the ARTC panel, or an employee of an authorised self-performer organisation that's engaged for an ARTC contract where the scope of works involves safe working. That's it. The other document that we produced, which is a new requirement, one of the key issues that we had and that came out of Frampton, the Frampton incident, which sort of kicked off the SWIP programme and our enforceable voluntary undertaking, is the requirement for locational knowledge and to understand the risk that each individual safe worker poses to our organisation. And one of the key issues there was that the person involved had never been to that location before and hadn't taken out that level of safe working for some time. So what we've designed is a safe working scorecard, which is to be completed as part of the engagement, which gives us some information on the safe worker that's been nominated for the role. So firstly, which corridor are they working in? And the second question is, when did they last work in that corridor? Next question is where they've worked in that location before, and then when did they last implement that level of safe working, and have they had a safe working breach? Out of that comes a risk score. If they're a low risk score, there's no restrictions on that person, they can continue. If it's a medium risk score, we'll be applying additional controls, which might be a pre-site visit, it might be some location validation once they get to site, it might be pre-submission of a worksite protection plan, or it might be an assurance check by one of the ARTC managers or a safety person from ARTC. If they're a high risk to our organisation, we'll have to take additional measures, and it will be a risk mitigation plan to the general manager for approval to use that person, but we'll be looking as to why that is. Next, Rich.
Okay, so a quick update on the Safe Working Services panel evaluation activities. As covered off by the previous slide, we thought we'd have the panel operational by 1 July. We're now changing that language to be available for use in July, and it'll still be available from that point for ourselves at ARTC to use, as well as our contractors and our external parties. Once we've got the contracts executed, we'll be in a position to announce who the panel members are and to clarify the roles and locations covered by each panel member. That information will be published on our externally facing Safe Working website, along with the list of authorised self-performer organisations. So you'll have one source of truth if you want, so you can see who is authorised, noting there's 2 authorised groups of service providers for safe working, and that will be the panel members and the self-performer organisations. So with regard to implementation times, the safe working framework comes into effect in July once the contract's been executed between ARTC and the successful panel members. And then commencing in July, new procurement activities will require the use of authorised providers of safe working services. So a quick recap on that again. It's, you know, if you're an authorised self-performer organisation, you can use the self-performers you employ and have primary registrations with your organisation to complete safe working services on a contract you hold with ARTC. The scope is broader than just the provision of safe working services, and the employees you utilise can't be casuals. If you were to need more resources, you'd have to go to the panel to obtain those. Or if you are not an authorised self-performer organisation, you will have to contact and obtain the services through one of ARTC's safe working services panel members. There will be a transition period in place for existing contracts and tenders live in the market at the point we go that the framework comes into effect. And this just recognises that that's quite a complex environment. We could have over 300 agreements, for example, that we might need to amend or speak to our contracting parties and partners so that we can introduce the requirements to use authorised providers of safe working services. And that timeframe is designed to not only protect our operations, but also provide a bit of continuity for key service providers and contractors. During this period of transition, there's a few activities we may do as a business. We again seek to amend contracts or standing offers that include the provision of safe working services as part of a broader scope. There will be contracts that are in play today that are solely for the use of standing offers. Solely for the use and provision of safe working services. So those contracts or standing offers, we'll either elect not to use or we could terminate. I think what's really important here is going through this process, and I know, and Kath's already covered it, we're not in a position today to say who's a panel member and who's not. If you want to make an application to become a self-performer organisation, that's something we'd absolutely encourage. And then once the transition period is ended, which will be from 1 December 2022, the safe working services must be provided by authorised providers. So again, you must be an authorised self-performer organisation, or you'll have to go to a member of the Safe Working Services panel to obtain safe working services. What we'll do is we'll be including this requirement in all our contracts from that point going forwards, and all our RFQ, so request for quotation and request for tender activities. And you can expect to see some standard questions in the RFQs and RFTs. The first question is a very simple question, is asking the tenderer to acknowledge that they understand and are aware of the requirement to only use authorised providers of safe working services. And the second question will be, how are you envisaging to provide your safe working services for the contract you're tendering for? And there'll be three options. It'll be, I'm an authorised self-performer, I'm not an authorised self-performer, I'll get it from the panel, or I'm an authorised self-performer, but I'll also need to I'll use a hybrid of my own resources, or I'll go to the panel for the additional resources I need. So I'll pass over to Richard Clark at this point to cover off on the Q&A and get some feedback from yourselves.
Thanks for that, Richard. Again, Georgia mentioned at the start, there are two ways to ask a question at the moment in time. If you use the icons at the top of your screen, if you'd like to submit a written question, please use the chat. If you click on the chat, you'll be able to type your question into the chat option there. If you actually want to ask a question, if you can use the reactions icon at the top and use the raised hand, we will try get to all the questions that are raised today, but if for some reason we do not get to answer all the questions, we will respond to each of those questions that are raised. So if we do feel we are running short, then please do input your questions into chat. And also there is the option to submit any questions via the SWIP email address, which has been mentioned a couple of times today, which is swip@artc.com.au. So on the chat, we had a couple of questions so far. One was around, will we be sharing today's presentation Yes, the presentation will be shared after commencement, along with all responses to the questions that are asked. Another question that has come in at the moment is, are other safe working roles such as TVO required to be sourced from the panel? The displayed procedure reference PO type roles only.
Yes, that is correct. It's everything that's on our ARTC safe working matrix, so all safe working roles.
Thank you for that, Kath. There's another question that, Kath, you mentioned earlier that safe workers employed by self-performers cannot be employed on casual basis. Is this applicable to safe working service panel as well?
I'll take
That's
this
a good
one.
question.
Yeah,
Thanks, Rich.
that they can, if a member of the safe working panel wants to engage casual employees, they can do so. Yeah, but the self-performer organisations can't.
Thank you, Rich. Another question that's come in Richard, is to yourself, is how do we access the latest versions of the templates?
That's from Rob, isn't it?
It is.
Are you Rob? Can I speak with Rob? Can he answer?
He should be able to answer. Yeah. Yes.
Rob, are you talking about the self-performer questions and the requirements document for self-performers? Because if you are, we'll include those on the wrap-up email.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. I'll also include the RFT and RFQ questions on that as well that I discussed as well just a moment ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying, Rob, and thanks very much, Richard. Next question from Aaron Johnson. Is there going to be another opportunity for companies not selected on the ARTC safe working panel this time around?
So I'll take that one. So the RFT documents and the tender process is designed to set up a panel for a 3-year period, while ARTC has a framework that allows us to add and remove panel members. This would be for to manage expectations for more exceptional circumstances. So in general terms, the panel members will be locked away for a 3-year period, and we do have the ability to extend those agreements by a further 2 years once they've started.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, those are all the questions that are currently come through in the chat. Would anybody else like to input a question into the chat or put their hand up and ask a question? Okay, questions just come in. Can we just please clarify the cut-off period for self-performers to continue works? And if unsuccessful, are we notified and offered support to fulfill the requirements?
Absolutely. So there is no cut-off period. When we've talked about the cut-off period, what we're saying is for contracts that may be executed early July. So we're requesting that those organisations that want to be self-performers for those works get their applications in early, but the applications will be ongoing going forward. What we would say is it will probably take 3 or 4 weeks for the application to be processed. So we just want to make sure that the companies that need those authorisations early up front get in there so that they can be assessed. And if you don't meet the standard, we will give you feedback, and there will be an ability to further apply it again.
And Kath, just to supplement that, and maybe if Toby, you could let us know if we're on point with our answers to your question, is that if you've got an existing contract and you want to apply to become a self-performer, that's what that transition period's up for, up to the 30th of November, is to provide that flexibility for existing contracts to either migrate to using the panel or to become an authorised self-performer. Does that answer your question, Toby? I'm a big believer in silence as yes after about 3 seconds. If
yep,
not, yes, yeah, good on you. Thank you, Toby.
Thank you for doing that, Toby. Okay, got a question from somebody with their hand up at the moment. I'll go across to Luke Dickinson.
Yeah, Luke, just a quick question in regards to for the guys that don't make the panel, and we've got to put in our PO sort of the list of our safe working staff. Obviously, we'll put in a list at the moment, and then that's going to change upon a panel being evaluated, and then all of those, you don't know how many of your resources you're going to lose over to panel members. So in the interim for those companies, is it put down everything that's available at the moment because there's no panel been announced?
Yeah, absolutely, Luke. So if you're, I think the context is making an application performer as a self-performer to become authorised as a self-performer. And yeah. So do your current state. Yes.
Cool.
Thanks for the question, Luke. Back to the chat questions. The question from Athol is, how can I get a question resent to a vetter?
This is good. Well, I will put my hand up and say I'm not the best on the Avetta system. We have some experts in ARTC and great support from the Avetta team. So what we'll do is, if you have any sort of technical or system questions around that, in the wrap-up email, we'll just include the details of who to contact so that you can get help. I mean, sometimes you might select the wrong box by mistake and then can't work out how to back it out. That's easily done, and we'll just provide the right contact details for you in the wrap-up email to do that.
Yeah, and I think George has also mentioned if you do email the SWIP at artc.com.au, we can provide you guidance and advice prior to that email being sent out if you just want to reach out. Next question from Bridget is, can you be both a self-performer and on the panel to provide to third parties?
Yeah, it is possible. It is possible to do that.
Simple answer, Richard. Thank you. Next question. From Peter Grillick, are there any additional considerations for interface locations with an adjoining rim, i.e. UGL-RL?
So I'll take that one. So it comes down to what we sort of said in the protocols for internal corridor. It depends whose accreditation you're working under. There may be some additional requirements, and we'll have to work through those with the interface agreements if there's any complexity there. But at the moment, we're using our accreditation requirements first and foremost.
Thanks, Kath. Next question is from Kieran Condren. If an organisation is successful for the panel membership in one jurisdiction but not another, is there a process to apply for selection in other jurisdictions?
So I'll take this one. Thank you. Good question, Kieran. So as to my answer previously, the tender process and the evaluation process will identify the panel members for each of the locations. Then the locations are really based around rules area books and NIBs. That will be locked away for the 3-year period. Now, we have a framework that allows us to make changes, but again, that would be for more exceptional circumstances rather than anything else. So yeah, that would be unlikely.
Thank you for that response, Richard. Just looking, that's the last question we have currently in the chat at the moment. Are there any more questions that would like to come through either the chat or via putting your hand up? Okay, another question's just come through from Aaron Johnson. Is there a requirement to be ISO certified to be an ARTC safe working panel member?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I'm not willing to talk about any of the requirements of the and process for the tender at this stage. We're still under that confidential phrase. So
thank you for clarifying.
I'm not Aaron, I'm not sure where you are, who you work, which organisation you work for, but if your organisation is successful or unsuccessful, if you have made an application, we'll be able to provide feedback and answer that kind of question at that time. But it's just not yet, I'm afraid.
Thanks for clarifying, Richard. Are there any further questions that would like to be? We probably have about another about 5 more minutes of time available. Okay, thank you for the next question from Peter Scott. Can a subcontractor still provide safe working services during the transition period?
So I think this would be, I'll just check, Peter, that I've got my scenario right before we answer the question. So the scenario I think you're referring to is we've appointed a principal contractor to build a bridge. A subcontractor to that principal contractor will be providing some safe working services. In this instance, can they continue to do that? If that's the scenario, then yes, during the transition period they can. We will be seeking to introduce the requirement to use authorised providers of safe working services during that time, but we do provide that leeway. I'll just quickly check that with you, Peter, there, that I've answered the question, or if you want to ask another related question.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for confirming that, Richard and Peter. Okay. Thanks again, Peter. Yep, thank you for confirming. Are there any additional questions like to be asked? Anybody else like to put their hand up and ask Richard or Kath a question, or any additional questions that would like to come in via the chat? Let's give it a few more seconds. Okay, I think that's all the questions. If there are any additional questions, please do feel free to submit them through to the SWIP email address. As we mentioned before, responses to all these questions will be compiled and submitted out as part of that, along with the presentation. So I'll pass across to Kath now, who'll just do some key takeaways.
Thanks, Richard. So key takeaways, I guess, from this session is the application for our self-performers is now open in a beta. If you do need to execute contracts early July, please get your application in as soon as possible so it can be assessed. The communication will be sent out shortly in the coming weeks to announce our successful Safe Working panel members. And as always, the recording of today's briefing session will be emailed out to all our attendees. If you've got any additional queries or concerns, please don't hesitate to email us at swip@artc.com.au. And thank you all for joining.